Hello everybody, welcome to the Alexander Robinson Movie News Show, episode 12 for August 1st, 2016. This is the first show of August, and the first one since Comic-Con, so there's been a lot of Comic-Con news coming out last week that I did pretty much a giant 40-minute long show, which is the longest show to date. I think it is. So now we're going to take things in a different path. We're going to have this probably be the shortest show. I mean, depending on how much I talk about our news stories here. If I talk about them a lot, then it could probably be just a regularly length show. Okay, the Comic-Con one's actually the second longest. The longest was actually episode 2, by only 20 seconds, or 15 seconds. I don't know if that... Yeah, that's not much of an accomplishment. Whatever. Moving on, I'm just yabbering at this point, so... This might be the shortest show, depending on how long I talk about these stories. But let's get into the first one. Let's talk about Pacific Rim 2, or as it's known, Pacific Rim Maelstrom. This story comes from superherohype.com. Love that name. Pacific Rim 2, Charlie Hunnam not coming back for the sequel. The saga of Universal Pictures and Legendary Entertainment's Pacific Rim sequel continues to unfold, as original star Charlie Hunnam confirms that he will not have a role in Pacific Rim 2. Hunnam shouldered the first film as the Jaeger pilot Riley Beckett, but he told MTV that scheduling conflicts had kept him from reprising the role. He says, quote, "There was definitely an incarnation of the sequel that involved me, but there was a changing of ownership of the studio itself, Legendary, and I think that because they partnered up with a Chinese company, and the film was so successful there was a real agenda to get that film into production as soon as possible." Now, I am actually okay with this, and I think most people are too, except for the ones who really, really love Pacific Rim, because I like Pacific Rim, and if you go back to my Best of the Year list, the reason why it made number 2, or number 3 if you saw the updated list in my review for her, the reason it was ranked that high on my list was simply because I thought 2013 was just a mediocre year for movies, and Pacific Rim was really one of the more memorable movies I saw that year. But really, it's not all that great of a movie. I like it still, but one of the big problems with the movie was Charlie Hunnam himself. He was just so bland, uninteresting. Basically, he was like Sam Worthington in most movies he's in, even Avatar. I like Avatar, but Sam Worthington is obviously the worst actor in that movie. And with Charlie Hunnam, if you watch Pacific Rim, every line of dialogue he speaks, it's like he's narrating a trailer. I mean, he is the narrator for most of the movie, but even when he's talking to someone else, it sounds like he's narrating something. It's like, dude, you're having a conversation with somebody. Emote or something. Like, he's just not that good. I don't think... I mean, I haven't watched Sons of Anarchy, which I've heard he is really good in, but in terms of the stuff that I have seen, there's nothing about him that really impresses me. So this is not a complete loss here, and having John Boyega in the role is probably a plus, because John Boyega has a lot more charisma, and I think is a little more likable than Charlie Hunnam. Now here's a little bit from the article that kind of intrigues me, that they say they could go the route of, like, having him in the movie for a bit, but here's what it says. By repeatedly using the term heavy involvement in interviews, it sounds as if Hunnam will definitely not be the star of Pacific Rim 2, but in his language, leaving the door open for a possible appearance. This tactic has worked well in the movies like Star Wars The Force Awakens, where Mark Hamill appeared at the end, or G.I. Joe Retaliation, where Channing Tatum is killed at the beginning. Kind of wrong comparison, because with G.I. Joe Retaliation, I feel like the reason Channing Tatum was in that movie was because he got super popular with Magic Mike and 21 Jump Street, which came out the year before. And he's only in it for a bit as his character from the first movie, and it seems like he really didn't want to be there. Whereas with Star Wars The Force Awakens, the entire plot of that movie was revolved around finding Luke Skywalker. Then the article goes on to say, Pacific Rim could be one of those properties where it's mostly about the brand and less about the stars, although the poor showings of Independence Day Resurgence has proven that leaving out an identifying figure, Will Smith, can be detrimental. Okay, superhero hype, come on. You're comparing Charlie Hunnam to Will Smith. Will Smith has charisma, Will Smith is a name, and people mostly will go see a movie because of Will Smith. Charlie Hunnam's not a name. He's not really that recognizable. And he doesn't have charisma. I'm sorry, but that's just full of bullshit. I mean, if Charlie Hunnam doesn't come back, then it's not a big loss. But if they do the thing where they do in G.I. Joe, where they kill him off in the beginning, then again, it's not a big loss, because, again, he's not the best actor in the movie at all. So, let's move on to Star Wars. More specifically, Han Solo. According to Collider.com, there is probably going to be more than one Han Solo movie, maybe a Han Solo trilogy. Alden Ehrenreich of the Coen brothers' Hail Caesar was recently tapped to portray young Han Solo in the second Star Wars story from Phil Lord and Chris Miller. According to the New York Daily News, the studio wants to capitalize on the hype surrounding this character and is developing plans for 3 Han Solo films total. And the insider says, quote, "There's a real sense of excitement around the Han Solo movie and its potential. Given that Han's early adventures do not need to be tied to the Empire, it leaves storylines open with the opportunity to really give fans something different. They feel that his story has the right potential to become a central figure in several movies. They're keeping things under wraps at the moment, but the deal is that he is signed for at least 3 movies. Okay, now, if I may just go off on Star Wars nerding for a second. For Han Solo's early adventures and it saying that it doesn't need to be tied to the Empire. The Empire is actually the reason Han Solo and Chewbacca met, because Han Solo was an Imperial officer on Kashyyyk, or according to the Star Wars, in Star Wars lore, I don't know if this is canon anymore, it probably is not, but Han Solo was an Imperial officer on Kashyyyk, and he basically turned against the Empire and saved Chewbacca, and thus Chewbacca gave Han Solo a life debt, which lasted until The Force Awakens. So a very important moment in the character of Han Solo, when he met Chewbacca, is tied to the Empire. So, I mean, maybe that's not canon, but that's something that probably should be addressed if you're making a Star Wars movie, and especially if this upcoming movie revolves around Han Solo meeting Chewbacca for the first time. Yeah, I probably deserve that. Now, for my opinions on a series of Han Solo movies, we'll see what happens. I mean, I'll have to see how I buy this guy as Han Solo, because Harrison Ford left a huge impression on everyone as the character of Han Solo that it's going to be really hard to top, because I've said this on the Movie Backlot podcast from Geeked Out Nation on several occasions, is that when you take a character like Batman, Superman, or Spider-Man, where they've had numerous actors play them, then that's fine because it's a new interpretation, same way as in the comics. With Han Solo, on the other hand, only one actor has played Han Solo, and that's Harrison Ford. So we need to see how this guy will do Han Solo. I mean, he does look like Han Solo, but will he be able to make us believe that he's Han Solo and not just do a Harrison Ford impression? Because that's the most important part of this upcoming movie. And honestly, with these Star Wars anthology films, I would much rather see movies based around new characters, or characters that aren't central figures. One of the big things that I wasn't too much of a fan of in Star Wars The Clone Wars, the animated series, was all the time spent on Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, characters that we've already spent time with. Now granted, the time spent with them in the Clone Wars cartoon is better than the time spent in the prequels, but even so, I find that introducing new characters is a little more interesting, or characters that don't get that much attention. Like, whenever the series focuses on other Jedi, that's a little more interesting because it gives us a chance to know these characters that were pretty much background in the movies. And that's why I'm kind of excited about Rogue One, because it has a new cast of characters. And on a side note, there were a lot of rumors that Han Solo was going to appear in Rogue One, and Gareth Edwards has confirmed that Han Solo will not be appearing in Rogue One, which makes a lot of sense because Han Solo doesn't really get involved with the Rebel Alliance until A New Hope, so it makes no sense for Han Solo to just pop up in Rogue One for no real reason. And I'm glad they're not doing that just for, like, recognition's sake. But let's move on from Star Wars to Marvel Studios, the other thing that I really like. So let's talk Spider-Man and Spider-Man Homecoming. This is actually a story that comes from Comic-Con that really didn't get much attention until after I did my show. And this story, once again, comes from Collider, and it says, Kevin Feige says Spider-Man sequels could follow the Harry Potter format. Now, we all know that this upcoming Spider-Man movie from Marvel Studios is going to have Peter Parker back in high school. I mean, we've seen that a million times before. But I think this one will work because Tom Holland actually looks like he is in high school, so that's good, instead of like the 28-year-old Andrew Garfield trying to pass as a high school student. Come on. So when asked if the Spider-Man sequels, if Homecoming is a hit, would keep Peter Parker in high school, Feige said, should we be able to make more after that? Sure, this is sophomore year. Is the next one junior year? Is the next one senior year? Is there a summer break between each of those? I don't know what, but it sort of was, how do we do a journey for Peter not dissimilar for what the students of Hogwarts would go through each year of their lives, which was one of the early ideas we had for the movies. So in the long run, what they mean by going the Harry Potter route is basically each sequel would take place each year of high school until Peter Parker's graduated, which I kind of like. I mean, we'll probably see Peter Parker during his summer vacation take place in the Infinity War, maybe, hopefully. But I'm down with that idea. But the key thing is, since Tom Holland is 20 years old, they would have to make these movies once a year. They'd have to get them going repeatedly, like they do with the Harry Potter movies, because the kids are not going to stay the same age forever. But we'll see what happens. I'm really looking forward to Spider-Man Homecoming. The cast looks really good and really diverse, and I just think it's going to be really good. I mean, with Marvel back at the helm again, there's no doubt that they'll get Spider-Man right. I mean, they nailed Spider-Man with the little bit we saw him in Civil War. And when they got Hulk back, they got the Hulk right. When they got Daredevil back, they got Daredevil right. Marvel can do no wrong. And for anyone who's doubting, come on, 13 movies in, I think they've proven their trust. But speaking of which, let's move on to Avengers Infinity War. Once was going to be a two-parter, Avengers Infinity War Part 1 in 2018 and Part 2 in 2019. But now Infinity War will only be one movie. This story comes from Variety and basically says Marvel's Avengers Infinity War will be one movie, not two. Disney has confirmed that it will make only one Avengers Infinity War movie rather than the two it had announced previously. Disney said on Friday that it still plans to release Marvel's Avengers Infinity War as planned on May 4th, 2018, but what was slated to be the second part of that story, Avengers Infinity War Part 2, has now been renamed to an untitled Avengers project, while retaining the May 3rd, 2019 release date. Because with something as big as the Avengers, you're not going to change the release date. At this point, Marvel has carte blanche to take any date they want. The two Infinity War movies were announced together in October 2014 at the Marvel event at the El Capitan, which I almost went to, but couldn't. But both of them directed by the Russo brothers, who did the last two Captain America movies. 2 months ago, the Russo brothers said that the third and fourth Avengers movies would be retitled in part to clarify that the films would be two separate films rather than one large film split in half. Now, I'm really curious what this all means, because when this was first announced back in October of 2014, at first I was like, oh great, another movie part 1, movie part 2 thing, because we saw it with Harry Potter, we saw it with Twilight, Hunger Games. I'm so sick of this. But on the other hand, there are movies in between the two Avengers Infinity War movies. At the time, it was Captain Marvel and the Inhumans. Now, it's Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel. But now, since the third Avengers movie is only going to be Infinity War, does that mean the Thanos story will just be told in that one part? Because sources keep saying that the movie that was once Infinity War Part 2 is going to be something different. I hope not, because we really need to see Thanos put in action and really show us how much of a menace he is before Infinity War comes out. I mean, we saw glimpses of him, but all we saw of him was him sitting in a chair telling people what to do, and then the last thing we saw of him was at the end of Age of Ultron, where he grabs a gauntlet and says, "Fine, I'll do it myself." I'm just, like, a little concerned about what's happening here. I think we'll get more clarification about what's going on as the years go by. I mean, maybe next year's Comic-Con will get some more information. So I'm curious about what's going to happen here. And I'm also really curious of who is going to be in Infinity War. Because as of now, Robert Downey Jr. and Jeremy Renner appear to be confirmed for Infinity War. I don't know about any of the other key players, like Black Panther, Captain America, Thor, Star-Lord. Will Captain Marvel make an appearance? Will Spider-Man make an appearance? We'll see what happens. I trust Marvel with it. As I've said before, I trust Marvel with their decisions. And obviously they have a lot of time to plan out this universe. Carefully, unlike Sony or DC. So, we'll see what happens. The day that Marvel loses my trust is the day they make a movie that I really do not like at all. Because I've liked most of the movies, and every time they make a movie that's just kind of so-so, like Thor the Dark World, they'll always bounce right back with something awesome like Captain America the Winter Soldier. So, we'll see what happens. And that pretty much does it for the news. You can tell that it was short because I didn't do the Patreon commercial. So, let's move on to Blu-rays, and there's not a whole lot to talk about. I may have said this before on occasion, but nothing really great comes out on Blu-ray until September, because that's when all the summer movies come out. It's closer to the holidays, so that's when the giant box sets for TV shows or movies come out. But this week we have some interesting stuff. We have Keanu, the first movie from Key and Peele, that I reviewed when it came out. I thought it was pretty funny. The two of them have really, really good chemistry, but it's not something that I really rush out to see again. Then, on Blu-ray, we have maybe the biggest thing coming out, which is Batman the Killing Joke, the latest DC animated movie, which apparently is not all that good. From all the reviews I've been hearing, it's not that good at all, because it has like 30 minutes, because it has a 30-minute prologue of bullshit. They butcher the character of Barbara Gordon, and I mean, there's half of me that's like, this is kind of a half joke, but this original comic was written by Alan Moore, the same guy who wrote Watchmen, the comic. So I'm under the impression that Alan Moore, when he writes comic books, he makes them to where they can't be done on film. But granted, I mean, Batman is a little easier to do on film. I don't know. I can't really speak for this because I haven't seen it. Some people have actually asked me to review this movie on my channel, and DC animated movies aren't something that I watch normally. And given the reviews, I don't really plan on seeing it, but I mean, maybe one day if I'm bored, or if I get enough demand, I'll watch it. I mean, I'm sure it's available to rent on iTunes when the time the Blu-ray comes out. So we'll see what happens. I mean, DC animated movies aren't things that I usually give my full attention to. So we'll just see what happens. Moving on, there's not much else to say. We have Mother's Day, which is, I think, the last movie from Gary Marshall, who recently passed away. I've heard nothing but bad things about this movie, so I have no interest in seeing it. But given the fact that his last few movies, New Year's Eve and Valentine's Day, were shitty, I wouldn't be surprised. We have Blind Spot Season 1, starring Jamie Alexander, which I've heard some good things about. We have the third season of The Blacklist, starring James Spader. We have, from Scream Factory, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Now, this is the version from 1978, which I actually have not seen. It stars Jeff Goldblum, Leonard Nimoy, and Donald Sutherland. And again, I've not seen this movie. I want to. I've only seen the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1956. But I've heard that this version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers is one of the better horror remakes out there, so I'm really curious to see it. I mean, again, especially since you have people like Donald Sutherland, Leonard Nimoy, and Jeff Goldblum in it. You can't go wrong. But that pretty much does it for the Blu-ray releases. Next week, there's only like one thing worth mentioning, which is, I'll just say it right now, it's Supergirl Season 1, which I saw one episode of it and didn't really like it all that much. I know it has a following, and maybe there's just something I'm missing, but the first pilot episode didn't really hook me in. So if you like this show, then hey, go for it. So that does it for the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on these news stories. Like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends. Don't forget to check out my official website. You can go follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Periscope, Riff.tv, and if you love what I'm doing on this channel, whether it's movie reviews, let's plays, or podcasts, you can go over to patreon.com/TheRealMrRobinson and give out a monthly donation. So until next time, this is The Real Mr. Robinson telling you, there is only one.